This session, we're going to focus on training evaluation and how this evaluation feeds back into your program as a cycle, going back with the results that we're learning, feeding back in. Look forward to presenting this and sharing with you. Evaluation of a training program, many times often seen as a final step, but in actuality it restarts the process of design and delivery. So a lot of ways your evaluation of your previous program begins the process for making improvements of the design and delivery for the next iteration of your presentation. You think of it like as a cycle, going through a cycling process. Evaluation training program is really important because it provides the data. When we think through this design and delivery piece, it provides the data to allow for the continuous improvement and also of your program. And then when you find out how participants have been impacted by the training, you then have the opportunity to assess how well the existing program works, and then sort of see what modifications you might need to put in place to make it even more effective. Unfortunately, for some, evaluation activity is often seen as an inconvenience because obviously it takes time. It may also be viewed as an imposition, but really it's essential. Trainers and teachers and online facilitators, we must acknowledge our duty to measure results and convince others that without doing so, we'll never know what in the training program should be changed and what kinds of assistance participants may need after they return to their jobs, or students might need as you're measuring outcomes, what obstacles still exist that prevent that transfer of training. So now I want to talk a little bit about interim feedback. And this, what we're talking about is during the middle of a program or at maybe the second module of a course or second week, you might send out a questionnaire or a real brief survey, because you don't want to really wait until the end. If you could correct something midstream, you can design your activity to obtain feedback and evaluation even as an ongoing basis. Maybe it's in a forum that you have set up. You can also do like a form, a Google form, or a survey like SurveyMonkey or something like that. You just don't want to burden your participants down too much because they may get tired of doing it. At the least, you want to observe behavior of your participant. And this may be hard to do in an online environment, seeing whether they smile or they seem alert, but you can definitely see if they're involved and do they ask questions. You can tell if they're engaged. You want to be doing that as you're going through your courses with your students and just kind of try to elicit some feedback from them. Obtaining oral and written feedback is really critical to helping you verify your impressions of the feedback that you're trying to obtain from your participants. Really, there's two ways, major ways: observation and through oral and written reports. You can obtain these, but oral feedback obviously is a real challenge, and want to make sure that you have the time to put in, that you can get that from your participant. But obtaining written feedback is usually quicker and really less threatening. Like I said before, you can use a form, a Google form, or a survey instrument, something like that, SurveyMonkey or something. However, you'll not be able to immediately clarify the information you receive if you want to probe further on a written, but in oral you can. These need to be well designed, and some of the best techniques we've listed here would be a post-session reaction survey, anonymous remarks, an oral survey, an informal interview, and an advisory group. Post-session reaction surveys, these create brief questionnaires and give them to the students at the appropriate moment at the end of a presentation that you give. Whether it's an online environment, you can do that. Send them a quick link, a hyperlink that they can go to and fill out a form for you. If that's something you like to do, or you could have a handout if it's a face-to-face presentation. Anonymous remarks, these can be students write a question, like for example, you could write a question on a blank chart or on a blackboard or even on a whiteboard and allow students to respond to it. They could do that in the chat window through commenting, and you can also allow them to do that. For example, you could, some one-word answer type questions, you could be like, what one word best describes your reaction to today's session? Or what will you remember from today? Or what was the most important thing you learned today? Things like that. You can also do an oral survey, get survey reactions by asking participants to share their feedback on the program out loud or with a group. You can also ask for volunteers to contribute or go around the group if you want to hear from everyone. For example, here's a good set of questions posed, like, what would you like to see less of? What would you like to continue? What would you like to see more of in the next session? You can also conduct formal interviews, casually solicit participant feedback at breaks or even through a virtual session you might have, and ask some questions like, what was the part of the presentation that was helpful for you? Was anything unclear? Are we ready to move forward to the new material? How do you feel about it? Then The fifth way to get oral and written feedback, possibly you could consider putting together an advisory group. Meet with a small representative of your class or the presentation that was there and obtain reactions. Maybe use a questionnaire to those similar in the list that we just talked about. That just kind of get them started. So just some different ways that you can do that for evaluating your program in an immediate way. In this next area, we're going to look at 4 levels of evaluation of a training program. We're going to look at these levels that were proposed by Kirkpatrick back in '94. They're very relevant, I think, but we'll look at each one in a little more detail in the next slides. But these 4 levels will be reaction, learning, behavior, and then results. So 4 levels of evaluation as we move forward. So here as we look at the first level of evaluating your training program of the 4, we want to remember that each level of evaluation has value in its own right, but really it's a combination of evidence that truly assesses how effective the training program is. So as we look at reaction, how participants react to the training, this one here, of course, the most common kind of training evaluation at this level. It's easy and fast and inexpensive when compared to evaluation efforts at other levels. When your program is ended, you'll naturally want to find out if the training met the participants' expectations. You kind of really want that immediate feedback, that instant gratification. To try to obtain a picture of participants' reactions to the training program as a whole, as well as a sense of their response to the various parts of it. So reaction is that kind of that first level, probably the easiest one to elicit from your participants. Level 2 we look at is learning, the evaluation of learning, the knowledge and skills participants obtain from the training. Besides finding out how participants view the training program, you need to know what attitudes, knowledge, and skills they acquired. Testing whether learning and change have occurred. Should involve, you can do pre and post-test training measures. Be sure to go beyond testing factual recall, though. See if participants can state the information in their own words, give examples of it, and apply it in a variety of situations. Without this information, really impossible to determine whether or not the training's met its stated objectives. So don't overlook the value of asking participants directly about what they've learned and how they will be applied. The simplest approach is to use a questionnaire or interview and ask participants what tools, skills, or ideas do you now have that you did not have at the beginning of the program? Or what have you learned that you can put into immediate use? Another question, for example, would be what have you already practiced outside of this course, this class? What intentions or plans do you have as a result of this program or this course? What do you want to learn next? So those things can be real helpful, and if possible, put these questions to participants not only at the end of the training program, but also to follow up a point even a few months later and just kind of elicit where they're at. I ask them to report what they have done to implement the training they received, so kind of that back on the job training program, if they've been able to implement that back on the job. A great idea is to summarize these reports and mail the results back to the participants so they can see that their feedback meant something to you and you're going to use that feedback, so it makes that important, shows that you value their input. The third level, level 3 of evaluation process for a training program, is behavior. This is really how your students are applying what they're learning, the training, the education, the content. You could ask your participants, your students, a simple survey, a question like, how have you been using the things you've learned in the course? Has this been able to help you in your back where you work, in your job? What specific steps can you take to continue to improve, to use the skills and knowledge you've learned in the training program? You can also use self-reports of participants. These may have some value, but there's no really way to confirm the changes that have been reported. So a post-training performance should be evaluated by checking out the skills of the participants. For example, in some of our courses, we actually have you using some of the technology that you're learning about as a platform for doing your presentations and your assignments and things. So you're actually being able to measure, do they have that skill, that behavior. Behavior is a little bit more involved, obviously, than level 1. It's level 3 as we're going down and the evaluation getting more intense, but this can be a very effective evaluation tool. And finally, level 4 is results. So what impact has the training, the education process had on the organization, on class, on the students' involvement within the course, within the program? Assessing the results is probably the most difficult to do, but with things like portfolios, e-portfolios, things like that can be very helpful to providing some feedback and being able to look at the data from there to examine whether students are actually, your content is actually producing the results that you've attempted with the outcomes that you've laid out. A portfolio is a great mechanism, but also you can send out some surveys, look at retention rates in your program and your courses, look at student awards, employee awards as well, maybe even from an organization that they're part of. They look at publications and conference presentations, scholarly work that students are doing. Also want to look at evidence from all four of these different levels. It doesn't really constitute proof that the training was responsible for all of the results, but if you carefully design it, it can do that. You just want to be careful in how you set up your evaluation program so that you're not focusing too heavily in one area, but you can elicit from all the different areas and bring that back into that cycle and feedback back into the cycle of how you design the next iteration of that program or course. As we begin to wrap this up and think about some final thoughts, 3 areas to consider in evaluation design is: one is focus, second one would be tools, and the third one would be timing. So in focus, you want to look at what elements are you evaluating. Your data can be gathered concerning any of the following way: your participants' reactions, the knowledge and skills and attitudes of the participants, the on-the-job application, or in the classroom on the course room management system that you have. Are they applying the thing that they're learning? And then as well, the results that we talked about in the previous slide. Some of the tools to use as you consider your evaluation design. So here, the tools are the means that you're using to collect evaluative data. So any of the following can be utilized, and probably more: questionnaires, your observations, tests, reports, interviews, competency-based opportunities for students to show, and those could be done through observation as well. I guess you could do that in some of the assignments that you give to your participants and trainees and students. Timing then has to do with when the data are collected, and any of the times are possible. You could do like a pre-training, post-training, and during training, like we talked about the interim evaluation as the students are going through. Those are some good ways to do it. Pre-training, understanding where the students are at during the training. How are things going? Are they getting through the course? Being able to access things? Are they finding what they need? And then at the post-training, then being able to measure and see the learning that's occurred as a result as you compare the post with the pre-training. Finally, it must be said that evaluation of a training program is not only about the outcomes, but it's also about the process. So as you think of your presentation, your work that you're doing, it's not just about the outcome, but also about the process. You want to continue to evaluate each aspect of that journey that the students are taking as they're going through the process. So the evaluation efforts should address what is happening in a training program as much as whether it is making any difference. Why is the process of evaluation so important? Well, without good records of what happened during a training program, it's not always clear what needs changing and if the outcome of the evaluation is disappointing. So how do you know what were the strong points and what things maybe need to be improved? And so try to log of events in the program, maybe a journal or something like that in a digital format that you could use for each course, what your reactions were as well, and how you would want to improve it in the next iteration of that presentation. You could also invite people from the outside, colleagues, to observe what you're doing and make some observations, what they experience. And so you'll really be able to develop some very good evaluative processes to go back and feed into that cycle of making your program even that much better. This brings us to the end of this module, this presentation, and so I hope you've been able to gain some good insights about evaluating a training program, and that it's a continuous, iterative process. It's never really finished. There's not an end in a sense of you complete a program, you evaluate, and you're done. You use that evaluation to help you and improve the next iteration of your program, your presentation, and include all these different aspects that we've talked about with the different types of feedback that you get: post-session, pre-session, pre-testing, post-testing, interim feedback, different types of feedback that you can get, anonymous remarks, whether you put up a chat window or whiteboard or something, allow students to provide feedback, do a form, a Google form or a Survey Monkey, an oral survey where you actually talk to students and interview them. What did they like? What didn't they like? Advisory groups work well. And then different levels of your evaluation with reaction, learning, behavioral, and results, and the measures that go into that. Remember that this is a continual process, and is really should be considered something that you use all the way through your training program and not just save for the end.